Welcome to my workshop. In the past, I've enjoyed sharing snapshots from my project with friends and family and getting feedback. In fact, my workbench itself is full of memories. The dartboard was the last Christmas gift my sister gave me in 1997, and it's still in working order. The batteries charging there are from the first Christmas gift from my in-laws, still the core of my tools now. The chair backs are from a set my wife and I found at a rummage sale, which I re-glued several times and eventually culled the worst two into interesting scrap. The photos are from a set I made for the Japanese consulate when applying there for a teaching visa. And the printout above the workbench has pictures of my wife's desk and measurements I got to turn into a bookshelf last year. And the workbench and sawhorses are ones I put together from readily available parts a few years back. There are more memories scattered about, but we'll save them and get down to business. My purpose here is to encourage household duffers with average tools just like me that there's no reason to wait until you have a garage full of cool toys and training as a master craftsman to start building what you need. One way to start is with simply using basic tools and good sense to put together simple, useful things you'd otherwise have to assemble with particle board and Allen wrenches. I'm also hoping to encourage others to help me and my friends at the Survey Institute by sharing the ways we can be a culture of makers. Even city dwellers, especially in places like Oklahoma, can definitely work toward having productive households rather than just being consumers all the time. Every time we make something basic and useful, rather than have it shipped in a box, we're helping to build a lifestyle for our grandchildren that is free, healthy, and sustainable. And finally, I'm hoping this will encourage many of you to notice how many ways you can teach children and young people life lessons and academic lessons from simple projects. Growing up, most of us learned some of our most important lessons at the boundary of play and work. You can still see the evidence for me in the 5-gallon bucket I use for my tools and the used pickle jars I use to store odds and ends on my workbench. Just two of dozens of things I learned being helper to my dad. So, enough talk. Today's project is simple. We're reassembling a plane. I haven't used a plane much since my dad first taught me how to use one, but I bought this one for a song on a clearance sale. It wasn't assembled properly by someone who tried to use it, and was probably returned for that reason. I've taken it apart and examined the parts, and it's time it stopped being scrap and started being a tool again. First, I'm just lining up the pieces. Anyone really experienced with these tools will probably see me doing in slow steps some things that are just habit for an experienced workman. But for those of us just learning, well, the assembly you see here with the bend in it has a bit of a curve so that when all the pieces are put together like a sandwich around the blade, it binds against the blade, holding it very firmly in place and maintaining the gap through which the shavings will travel. The set screw you see here is the only part of this clearance sale tool that actually had a problem. Someone had tried to force it into place badly, and it has one thread that is damaged. And here's the big shiny piece that goes on top of the blade sandwich, putting pressure on the whole assembly by means of that big shiny set screw. Before going ahead with reassembly, I want to knock off as much of this rust as I can. I don't want to have to repeatedly disassemble this tool, so it might as well go back together in as good shape as I can manage. I'm doing this the way we did it in fencing club. Just scrub off the rust with a sanding block. Now, I can't reverse the pitting, so I'll just have to do my best to rust-proof the blade in the future, but you can already see that's quite a lot better. And of course, we want to check the edge before assembling the tool. I've sanded carefully across the edge to knock off any particles or spots where it might have been slightly dinged in transport, but it's still plenty sharp. I'll save learning how to properly sharpen this blade for some other day. Alright, now I'm testing how the pieces fit on the assembly. I know this spring-like plate has this notch for the lever that shifts the blade angle, and that its set screw drops into a recess on the body of the plane. And I know where the long bolt that holds the whole blade sandwich together goes, but I'm still getting this figured out, as you can tell. Note that the springy plate is now in a different position than last picture as I tried to fit out properly. Yes, I did use some common sense and some experimenting to fill the gaps of memory. A safer bet might be to look it up, but in this case I was pretty confident it wouldn't really go wrong. Probably wouldn't go together more than one way, without really forcing things. One thing my dad taught me was never to force an assembly together. And now it's mostly worked out. Blade on the bottom, then the springy steel bit, then the heavy top bit. I've already very carefully threaded the set screw into the springy bit, and now the bolt is in place as well. Note how the heavy top plate drops down over the bolt, then slides up so the bolt's head binds on the edges of the slot. And now my trusty giant screwdriver, after many a battle with a pommel nut and fencing club, gets to tighten down the main bolt on this assembly. And on goes that shiny heavy set screw, nice and snug, leaving a little play at first while I make sure I figured out the blade's depth and travel. Of course, as you can see, using still pictures means I've left out a lot of the fiddling and adjusting I had to get this result. With the whole assembled, I've run a light test down the top of my workbench, possibly not in need of planing, but not likely to be harmed by it either. Based on these wispy little curls, I have some hope that I've put this thing together fairly well. The workbench, incidentally, is one of the places I most often find myself doing the same math I spent elementary school dreading. One of the reasons I knew it was worth it was watching my dad work out measurements with his pencil on the workbench. And when my nephews and niece came to visit, they carried on the tradition. A little more testing, and I'm satisfied this plane will turn bumps on boards into fine little shavings for some time to come. If you're one of the many experienced craftsmen out there with advice for me, please share it in the comments. And all of you, please look into my workshop again sometime. And more importantly, go make something in yours.